So, well, with that out of the way, let's get right to the conversation with Knox Williams from the American Suppressor Association. Take a look and a listen to our conversation right now. Knox, thanks so much for coming on the program. It's good to talk with you this morning, sir.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Cam.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, the vote was close, 215 to 214 in the House, but as of right now, this is very good news. The manager's amendment came out, I guess, late Wednesday night. Apologies for the rooster there in the background. Speaking of silencers, boy, I'd love to be able to suppress Mario the rooster right now, but he's out on the front porch, so we'll just have to deal with that. But this manager's amendment comes out on Wednesday night. Shut up, rooster. And the language, Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act, was included. This was something that obviously gun owners have been asking for, obviously yourself. And we saw on Wednesday afternoon this letter from, about 40 different organizations coming together and asking Congress to include Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act in this budget reconciliation bill. Can you talk about how that letter came together?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, it's a great day to be an American. And I think that we owe a huge debt of gratitude to House leadership and to all the members that voted for President Trump's one big, beautiful bill that he wants to get to his desk. The inclusion of Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act is something that we've been working on for over a decade as part of a major coalition. And that's really what came together with that letter. To be able to have groups like ASA, the American Suppressor Association, where we are, the NRA, Gun Owners of America, Second Amendment Foundation, DRGO, the Academy of Doctors of Audiology. I mean, just a wide swath of people that are interested because they know that suppressors are hearing protection devices and that they should not be subject to the NFA taxation and registration scheme that they've been under since 1934.
Absolutely. And again, this language right now, as introduced, we saw come out of the House Ways and Means Committee. There was the repeal of the $200 transfer tax, but the $200 maker tax was still present, right? And obviously, suppressors would still be considered restricted items under the NFA. That's all gone now under this current language of the budget reconciliation bill.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act, which I believe on the manager's amendment was lines 12 to 14 on page 39. It looks very simple because it is. It's a simple strike through of silencer in the NFA tax code section. After that, you do have the zeroing out of the tax for the making and the transfers of suppressors. So really, that's kind of the insurance policy in case the Senate parliamentarian decides that she doesn't think that Section 2 is Byrd Rule compliant, which is a provision that is part of this reconciliation process to make sure that any measure that's included has a revenue nexus. And that's because the voting threshold in the Senate is down to a simple majority, so 50 votes instead of 60, because you can't filibuster over there. So we are very confident that this is going to pass muster, that this is Byrd compliant, because again, the NFA in its entirety exists as a taxing scheme. It was upheld in 1937 in the Sinsinski case. It made its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they ruled that this was justified as a taxing measure. So really, for all intents and purposes, we see it as a slam dunk, but we don't want to leave anything up to chance. We want to make sure that we get the best win that we possibly can, regardless of the parliamentarian variable.
Yeah, and it is good to have that insurance measure. When I was talking with Representative Andrew Clyde earlier this week, I mean, he did note that the registration is actually a registration on you paying the tax, right? It's not necessarily a registration on you purchasing the suppressor. So the tax goes away. By nature, the registration requirement should go away, right?
Yeah, and that's the line of thinking, and we'll be working on next steps if it does land on just a zero out. But by far the simplest thing, the best thing that Congress can do is just strike it out, remove them from the National Firearms Act, and let it be done.
So would suppressors be treated as firearms then? I guess, the big question a lot of people have is, can I go and buy one over the counter? Am I still going to have to go through a background check? Like, how will this work if suppressors are removed from the NFA?
So if Section 2 is included and it gets signed into law, then suppressors would be removed from the National Firearms Act. They would be subject to the Gun Control Act. So they would be treated just like rifles and shotguns, like long guns. So if you live in one of the 42 states where suppressors are currently legal, you go to your gun store, you fill out your 4473, assuming that you pass that, you're walking right out the door with your new suppressor. So it really would be a fantastic day for Americans in those states. Unfortunately, it would not legalize them in the 8 states where they are currently prohibited. Mm-hmm. That is something that we are working on separately through litigation to try and get the Supreme Court ultimately to rule that Second Amendment protections do apply to suppressors and therefore they cannot be banned. But that is a separate issue.
It is. And honestly, Knox, if this language gets signed into law, as you all know, we're going to see a major push on the part of the gun control groups to expand the number of states that prohibit suppressors, right?
Yeah, and to that, I'd say we're ready. This is something that we've got a lot of experience in. We've defeated ban attempts in Virginia. We've defeated ban attempts in New Mexico. This is not something that's new to us. I'd be very willing to have that fight, especially if people are willing to have it based on the facts and the merits rather than the myths and the misconceptions that they peddle in.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, we do have to educate the public on this. While there are millions of Americans who own suppressors, and I think millions more who will own suppressors if they're deregulated out of the NFA, there are also, I think, tens of millions of Americans who have bought into the lies of the gun control advocates that these things, completely muffle the sound of a firearm. They make a rifle whisper quiet. They bought into the sort of the Hollywood myths, as you say. So what do we need to be doing now to counter the lies and the misinformation from the anti-gun crowd?
I mean, getting the facts out there, right? That's really the only thing that we can do. We got to fight fire with fire. And the best thing to do is take people out to the range. Now, unfortunately, we can't take, tens of millions of people out to show them what suppressors actually do.
Right.
But when it comes to lawmakers, when it comes to regulators and political influencers, that's something that we're going to continue to do. We've been doing it since 2011. And obviously, if this thing passes, then we're going to have to ramp that up at the state level anywhere that these things are under threat. But by and large, just, getting the facts out there. Hey, guns are very loud. They're so loud that even with earplugs and earmuffs, they can still damage your hearing. Suppressors are a very effective tool to help mitigate preventable hearing loss, which is one of your 5 senses, right? Like, I don't think that people should be so cavalier with something that you cannot fix, you cannot replace. I really think just making sure that we're putting out good facts, to fight the anti-gunners, the folks that are coming after these. That's really kind of all that we can do. Absolutely.
And I'm curious, if this becomes law, and fingers crossed that it does, obviously, as you say, firearms are suppressed to be treated as firearms. You can pass a background check. You can walk out with a suppressor. Do you think this will revolutionize gun making? Do you think we will start to see more firearms produced that have suppressors already integrated into the design of those firearms? Obviously we know it's possible, right? We've seen that before. Do you think that'll become more commonplace?
I think it's very likely that it will become more commonplace, especially you look at, semi-automatic platforms. You can integrate a suppressor in there and have, an overall barrel length of 16 inches without having to trigger the SBR, right? Whereas, if you put a suppressor on even a Mark 18 from Daniel Defense, that's got a 10.3 inch barrel. You put a 6-inch can on there, all of a sudden that footprint is, over 16 inches. So if you build that into the barrel, then that, I think, will be something that a lot of manufacturers will start to do, which would be fantastic. Integrally suppressed guns have been around for, the better part of almost a century at this point. So it's not exactly new technology, but right. I do think that it would become more commonplace.
All right. And I've got to ask, too, because I know this is, something that a lot of gun owners are talking about. It's great news that Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act was included in the budget, but, there are a lot of folks who are also asking for inclusion of the Short Act, right? They wanted to see SBRs, SBSs removed from the NFA as well. Was that a topic of discussion among this coalition that signed this letter that came out yesterday, which referred specifically to Section 2 of the Hearing Protection Act? Was there any discussion about that same coalition advocating for the inclusion of the language from the Short Act as well?
Yeah, so the gun groups that we've been working with for this whole process, we are all in lockstep that we would love to see nothing more than HPA and the Short Act become law. The question really becomes one of political strategy, not so much ideology. We are in line completely on that. It's really just do we have the votes to get that in? And our assessment and the word that we got back from House leadership was, hey, we just don't have the votes for the Short Act. Certainly applaud, groups like GOA and Representative Clyde for pushing it, and I hope that they continue to do so. Again, we would love nothing more than to see the Short Act included in the final reconciliation package as well. Again, it just comes down to a question of what can we get done.
Yeah, absolutely. This was, I think that came into consideration even the House Ways and Means Committee, right? Yep. I think that there was some horse trading that was done sort of behind the scenes to get that language included, to not go any further in order to have unanimity from the Republicans on the House Ways and Means Committee, with that sort of understanding that, okay, there's going to be that chance to revise this language via a manager's amendment going forward. And there is the opportunity, I'll admit, I think it's going to be an uphill fight, but I think there is the opportunity in the Senate now to expand on what the House has done and to maybe get the Short Act included. But that's going to depend a lot on gun owners contacting our representatives, right? It's the optics that I think a lot of these politicians are worried about. It's what's the press going to say? What are the anti-gunners going to say that the press is going to simply parrot and repeat, right? And so it's up to us to apply that pressure to our representatives and explain the facts to them, and hopefully put enough pressure on, nominally pro-Second Amendment lawmakers that they'll do the right thing, and with including the Short Act as well.
You're absolutely right. We've got to keep the pressure up. Members on the Senate now need to know that this is an issue that gun owners and their constituents care about. Whether you're contacting them through us, through NRA, through GOA, doesn't matter as long as you're contacting them. And guys, do it polite. Coming in, screaming at these staffers. At the end of the day, most of the people that are picking up these phone calls are about 22-year-old interns, right? Like, they don't have really a key role in this policy, but they're taking a note of every time someone calls in and says, hey, we're in support or we're opposed to X, Y, or Z issue. So make those calls, be polite. It really goes a long way, and you'd be surprised at how much that can make or break an issue.
Absolutely. And while we're advocating for the Short Act, we also need to be talking with our senators about keeping the language intact, right? Because, again, the gun control groups are going to be putting a lot of pressure on senators to amend this budget bill to remove the language that was included last night, right? That fight's not over as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think that it's so neat watching this particular process, right? We've been working on this for 14 years. We formed back in 2011, and this was one of our initial stated goals, is trying to get suppressors removed from the National Firearms Act. But to see in this particular Congress, in this process, with new leadership at NRA, who are unwilling to back down, coming in and saying, hey, we're going to give you the praise that you deserve if and only if you earn it. And to hold the House's feet to the fire. There was no daylight between ASA, NRA, GOA on this issue. And I just think that that's a fantastic thing that we should all be celebrating, and we should all take a moment to pat ourselves on the back for. The guys over at NRA, John Comerford, Josh Savani, the new leadership, Doug over there, it's fantastic, and it's truly a breath of fresh air. I can't think of a single time where us and NRA and GOA have all worked this well in concert together to push the same common goal. And I think that that's something we should celebrate and keep up and get this thing through the Senate and to the president's desk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to piggyback on that for a second, I down in Atlanta at the NRA annual meeting, I was talking with Doug about this, and I said, it's great to see the NRA build these coalitions and partnerships in terms of litigation, which is something we hadn't actually seen a lot of in the past. And now you're seeing NRA work with groups like GOA, FPC on litigation, right? Not just the state level affiliates. It's great to see that happen on legislation as well, right? Because we are a stronger community when we are rowing together, and we can get more done when the infighting stops and when the coalition building starts. And so I think you're absolutely correct about that. I am heartened to see that this coalition came together. And again, I hope this is a new chapter and a new day for Second Amendment activism on Capitol Hill, quite frankly.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
All right, Knox, listen, man, I appreciate you taking a little bit of your time out of a very busy day, I am sure, and look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Well, Cam, thanks so much, man. It's truly a pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll talk again soon. Knox Williams joining us here on Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. My thanks to Knox for joining us on the program, and looking forward to having him back again very soon. And again, I know we just talked about this, but it really is worth acknowledging.